All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Still in a pandemic. Day 357. What do you want to talk about today? The movie? You want to finish the movie? Yeah.
I know it. I saw you. I know
it. Good. I'm glad you're on top of things. It's it's comforting. Wrap up China. Yep. Wrap up China. Start talking about Greece maybe tomorrow or the day after. We got to deal with the Han period of China first. But I'm going to say hello to Hadil. Good morning, Hadil. Noah's here. Good morning, Noah. And Irina's here. Good morning to you. Okay. So, yesterday, where were we? Oh, yeah. I'd asked you to read this short section of the textbook just to sort of set up the Qin Dynasty and legalism. And so we said the first emperor of Qin here, who we actually get to put a face to the name. The first emperor of Qin sort of unites all of the area around the Yellow River and sort of creates a united China. I'm just going to turn this down just a little bit. There we go. In about 221 BC, so we're looking at about 2,200 years ago or 2,200 years ago, and he's able to unite all of these former kingdoms into one, right? And so he borrows a number of things from this Shanyang, who is from the kingdom of Zhou, and Shanyang advises him on a couple of legalist reforms, right? So attempts to centralize power within the emperor so that he can rule this large area, right? And so we heard about them organizing villages into teams of 5 families and kind of making everyone responsible to everyone else. Everyone gets rewarded if they do well. Everybody gets punished if they don't. And so, again, he kind of cleverly, that's a very useful technique. It's not really a technique that people probably enjoyed, but it works, right? It's like if you have an elementary school classroom and, if anyone doesn't do their homework, everyone stays after school. It's not fair, and nobody likes that, but there's a lot of social pressure to get your homework done, right? Because you don't want to be the one that is responsible for everyone having to stay after school. So it's not fair, and people don't enjoy it, but it does work. So they organize farms this way. He develops a legal code, right, which is kind of similar to the code of Hammurabi, if you will, except different from that code because the punishments are all equal. It doesn't really matter if you're a high status or low status person. You will be punished. Equally, right? So creates a law code, creates a bureaucracy to kind of run the state, and so it's I guess it's kind of an interesting or noteworthy development because again, lots of rulers can just sort of do whatever they want, right? So if you're pharaoh or if you're a god, you can just basically tell people what to do and they do it, right? But here, he's kind of setting up a structure for the state that operates almost without him, right? So he's not going to have to make every little decision because there are laws and rules and bureaucracy that will run the state for him. And so he won't have to make every little decision within the state, right? And so to get a bit of a window into what this period of history might have been like, we were watching this film about the first emperor of Qin. And so I said it's about 30 years old or so. It's kind of a science-y documentary. It was shown in IMAX at one point. And again, it tells the story of the first Qin emperor and how he goes around and unites all of those warring states under him, and sort of gives us a little window into what the world looks like in this period. So very quickly, just to review, what kind of things did we see in that movie that are worth pointing out? What did we see in that movie that is kind of worth pointing out? Yeah, so he gains power through violence, right? Through military conquest, but also that's how order is kept within the state, right? People aren't usually fined because nobody has money. People don't go to jail because there's no such thing as jail. People are brutally punished, right? And we saw the prime minister who attempted to overthrow Qin. He had to drink poison, and his co-conspirator got pulled apart by horses, which I can only imagine is incredibly painful. And I imagine that the assassin was killed as well, right? So remember that guy who tried to assassinate him, and nobody could come up on that raised area, and he was fighting him, but I assume he didn't. He probably met a very violent end as well, I suspect. What else did we see? Yes. Yeah. So most people in China at this period are probably living a very simple existence. So we saw a very basic kind of clay or mud hut with a little fence around it and a cow, probably some farming fields behind it. And that's probably how most people in that period lived their lives, right? Of course, we see the emperor is living in, lavish luxury with carpets and fancy clothes and good food and, dancing girls and the whole thing, right? So there's a big kind of economic disparity between most people and between the emperor. What else do we see? Bronze is? Indeed, yes. Bronze is an important material, right? Lots of things get made out of bronze. Like what?
The best we had at that point?
Yes. Most societies go through kind of a stone age where they're making things out of stone. Then they start using copper because copper is a soft, easily worked metal. Then they start to add tin to it and they create bronze, which is much harder. And then they move on to iron. But iron is more difficult because you have to create a forge and you have to get your temperatures higher than with copper or bronze. Copper and bronze will melt at a lower temperature. Iron, you need a hot furnace, and people need time to figure out how to do that. What's that? Yeah. Right. So they have bronze things. What do they make out of their bronze? In some cases, statues. What else? Although I think the statues of Qin that we saw are probably stone. I think that would be a lot of bronze. I don't think they're bronze.
I thought they
Were they?
They used their bronze swords.
Oh, that's right. They melted down this. Right. Okay. They were bronze. Wow. Lavish. Right? Because again, bronze is not super common and takes a lot of work. So wow. Those are expensive statues. You're right. So they made those statues. They made weapons out of the bronze. What else did they make out of bronze? Yeah, well, they made those, I don't know what the instrument is called, but they're kind of like, they're bells, right? There's all those big bells that you ring. What else did we see?
The wall, that divided the south from the north, abandoned barbarians.
Yeah, we see a defensive wall being built in the north to keep out those barbarians to the north. Of course, eventually it won't work. The barbarians will come anyway, but that's It's another period in history. What else? Yeah, did we see any evidence of religious belief? Maybe what? Oh yeah, we heard a mention of the Son of Heaven or the mandate of heaven. So yeah, that's the mention of a supernatural power. So that works. What else? Was it the last thing? Oh, like music or dance or things like that. The cultural expression thing? Yeah. So yeah, artwork, music, dance. Yeah. Well, we saw all those things, right? We saw the girls dancing. We saw those musicians playing music while they danced. We saw some artwork in the palace, that fantastic dragon that's behind the emperor. I don't know if it's a painting or what it was, but there was a big dragon on the wall behind him, which is, yeah, right? We heard about in the documentary, right? The two cosmic forces, the phoenix and the dragon. The dragon is the sky and the phoenix is the earth. So yeah, there's a element of religious symbolism maybe, or spiritual symbolism. What else? Technology, people's homes, governance, subsistence, tech. Effectively, we saw tons of technology, because everything you see is technology in terms of their clothing, their shoes, their weapons, things people are eating out of, like bowls. All of that stuff is technology. Musical instruments are technology, all of it. Good morning, Sophie. So basically anything you see is technology here. Spiritual, religious, cultural expressions. Okay. Yeah, I think we've covered it. So let's move on and let's just watch the rest of the film. There's only about 10 minutes left, so it's easy to watch the end. We'll talk a little bit more and see if we see anything else interesting. And then I have a little bit for you to read. It'll be the last little bit on China. And then we'll kind of tie up loose ends maybe today or tomorrow. And then we'll be able to move on to Greece, I think. But let's finish this film first, okay? So this is about where we left off. I think this was Qin talking to some of his military generals about the defensive wall and to keep out the barbarians or the nomads. I think that's what they're talking about anyway. And yeah, I wonder if we have a phoenix on that back wall. Do you think that's a phoenix? Maybe? Is it a peacock? Is it a peacock? Could be. Do peacocks come from that part of the world? Would they have known? They're from Southeast Asia originally, are they not? Peacocks? I'm not sure. Do you know that there's actually a bunch of wild peacocks living in Surrey? Do you know that? Or have you seen them? Yeah, there used to be in Surrey, I forget where it is, but if you Google it, you'll find it. There was like a game farm, or somebody had a bunch of peacocks, and then the game farm went out of business, and they just released the peacocks and walked away. And so now there's a bunch of peacocks living in the neighborhood, annoying people because they're like crawling around on their roofs and pooping everywhere and making a lot of noise. But there's live peacocks.
Are they harmful?
No. I mean, they might. No, I don't think they're harmful. They're just kind of a nuisance for people. But they're beautiful, right? They're beautiful birds. But yeah, they're just living in Surrey. I saw them once. I was driving around Surrey looking for something, and I drove, and I looked out the window and I just saw this peacock like sitting on someone's lawn, eating bugs or whatever it was doing. And I drove by and I stopped and I was like, did I just see it? I backed up. I was like, yep, that's a peacock just sitting there on someone's lawn. And yeah, they've tried to trap a bunch of them because they're a nuisance to the people living there, but they haven't caught all of them yet. So there's still wild peacocks running around Surrey. Crazy. Anyway, yeah, maybe that's what that is. Um, the headgear ornamentation is quite something in ancient China here, is it not? Yeah, the headwear is impressive. What's that? Is it? Well, it's definitely something. I think we can say that it is something. Okay, online people, the link is still in Microsoft Teams, so you can check it out there. I think I have it. Let me just see where I'm starting it. I just want to make sure we're all starting at the same place. So for online people, I am starting the movie right at 25 minutes. So start at 25 minutes and then watch the rest, then come back here. We'll see if there's anything else to say about the movie, and then we'll continue on. Okay, so online people, will see you in just a little bit. Okay, so we're back. Good ending?
For what?
What's that?
For what? For who?
For I don't know, for you? For him? I don't know. So what did we see here? We saw a little bit of the sort of early construction of what would become the Great Wall, China's Great Wall. We saw his quest for immortality, and what were they giving him to Mercury? Yeah, turns out Mercury's pretty toxic, right? Builds up in your brain, starts to cause cognitive issues. Not good. You should have just gone gluten-free or something. I don't know. Yeah, so we see his eventual death as he's looking for immortality, which is kind of interesting. Was anyone, when Qin was out looking for immortality, were you thinking about Gilgamesh? Nobody was thinking that. I was kind of thinking so, because it's he's not the only character to sort of go on a quest looking for immortality, looking for eternal life, right? And Gilgamesh is a mythical figure who goes on that search. Qin is a real historical figure who goes on that search. But it's kind of interesting. You have this constant theme of looking for immortality, right? People don't want to die, especially people who have everything else in life except that one thing. Actually, it strikes me that that's actually a similar plot line to, has anyone seen that the Marvel movie there, The Wolverine? You know, the one where Wolverine goes to Japan? Nobody's seen that one? Really? Oh my gosh, okay. Anyway, the sort of the bad guy of that movie is another rich, powerful man who is trying to live forever, who wants to be immortal. So again, it's a similar kind of plot line, I guess. Is there anything else new that we see in this section of the film that we should point out?
Yes.
What?
The sun. The one is that with his father, well, his elders take over.
Right.
They need for the
Yeah, treachery, right? So treachery. The emperor dies, and in the emperor's will, the first son is supposed to inherit everything, but then there's a forged will, right? The 18th son makes a forged will. Looks like he has the help of whoever the emperor's assistant was. It looks like he helped him out. They wrote a new will telling the first son to commit suicide, which he did. And then the 18th son becomes the emperor, although clearly not for long, right? What else do we see?
fall of the empire.
Yeah, the sort of fall of that Qin dynasty, right? That was supposed to last for 10,000 generations and lasted for like 1.2. Yeah, not long. Oops. Such is often the case, though, with ancient empires and kingdoms, right? They are very much reliant on one person, right? And when that one person is gone, often things disintegrate, right? And we have a Terracotta army, right? We have Qin creating a clay copy of his entire army and burying them with him. And I don't know if you noticed, you probably did, but when they were showing the footage of it, all of those terracotta figures are unique, right? They're not all the same person. They're all unique individual people, which is incredible, right?
And they seem to be taller than present people.
A little bit. Some of them seem to be on a bit of a block, right? A bit of a pedestal sort of thing. But they might have been made a little bit larger than life, maybe.
So like the driving machine is not something for
That's true. Yeah, that's true. They were a little bit, but the horses seemed smaller. Did they not? I feel like the horses seemed smaller and the people seemed bigger. Hmm. Either way,
In the footage, in the carving, yes, but in the footage,
in the carving, yes, but in
in the footage with the.
oh no, no, but the clay horses seemed a little on the small side. Still, fantastic archaeological find, right? Anything else? Yeah, that's good. So the idea that when people die and are buried, there is some sort of ability to take with you what you already have, right? And the Egyptians kind of had this as well, right? They buried their pharaohs with all of their riches and furniture and clothing because they would use it in the afterlife. And it seems like here in China they have, or at least Qin has a similar belief that he can take these things with him into the next life, right? His army, his riches, his weaponry, all of the comforts of his life on earth he can take into the next world, right? Which of course is not universal, right? I can't speak to all of your traditions, but here in the West, in Christianity, there's a saying you can't take it with you, right? And so Christians aren't really buried with anything because there isn't the idea that you can take anything with you to the next world. Only your soul goes to heaven, not your stuff, right? Anything else?
When they were making the army, was it him who was providing everything, or
I think what we were seeing is him kind of inspecting, so they were building the Terracotta army, and they were creating all sorts of goods that would go into the tomb with him, and I think he was kind of going out to inspect their progress and see how they were doing. And so I think he was just looking and commenting on things, and I think that's what was happening. Do you think that was worth watching?
No,
What's that?
no.
It's knowledge. It's knowledge. Again, there's no CGI sort of thing. A little bit of CGI actually would have been nice in this film, but still, it looks good, and maybe it gives us a little idea of what things were like. And I think that's why there were no subtitles as well, because I think they wanted you to actually listen to the language, even if you didn't speak the language, just to hear it and kind of. You can, but you kind of pay less attention, I think. I don't know. I don't know why they chose not to. I'm just guessing, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. What's that?
What was the name of the army?
They call it the Terracotta army. Terracotta is a kind of ceramic or clay. And archaeologically speaking, ceramic is great because if you fire it correctly, it's basically indestructible. And so those guys probably sat there for 2,000 years, and they look just as good as they did when they were buried. Although you can see that they were painted, right? In the past, they were painted these bright colors, and the paint hasn't. The paint did not preserve, but. Yeah, let me see. Oh yeah, I've got that. Okay, so maybe we'll leave Qin and the First Emperor and the Terracotta army. I had a question that I wanted to answer. Shoot, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, I've got a little bit of reading for you to do on Han Dynasty. The Han will come after the Qin, after a period of, again, instability. And so I'll get you to read this section of the textbook, answer the questions of how the Han Dynasty begins, what society is like, how the Han Empire sort of governs itself. We'll hear about the ideas of Confucius being added into the governance of the state, which we sort of talked about a little bit. And then very quickly, a little mention of the Silk Road, okay? So I'll let you read that. We'll answer some questions, and then we'll kind of tie up China, I think. Does that please the court? Okay. All right. I'll give you some time to read, and then we'll talk. Okay. Put some time on the clock here. And I will be right back. Okay, hardworking people, why don't we take a little break? We'll come back and then we'll deal with Han Dynasty, okay? Okay, and we're back. So I hope we've had enough time to read this. Let's get rid of our countdown here. Let's answer some questions and sort of bring this to an end. So, how does Han Dynasty begin? What happens? Yeah, so again, we have a pattern of political legitimacy through warfare, right? Who should be in charge? The guy who leads his armies and kills the most soldiers in the other army, right? That's who winds up leading. So again, we have kind of a pattern of political legitimacy through violence, but again, it's the ancient world, so that's kind of how things work. What else does it explain here about the beginning of Han Dynasty? What about farmers? The guy is a farmer? He was, I believe. Yeah, what's his name? He's got a name. Yeah, Liu Bang, right? So he is. So we have the Emperor of Qin, who we saw in the movie. Qin dies, and he's replaced by his 18th son. Again, this son is probably not strong enough to keep the empire together, nor are any of his successors, and the whole thing kind of falls apart. Again, we have a period of decentralization where people are fighting for power, right? That's the problem with having such a person with so much power is once they disappear, there's a vacuum, right? There's a power vacuum. There's nobody there, and so everybody tries to jump in and grab power. There's a little bit of fighting and chaos that goes on, and finally we see Liu Bang becomes the sort of unifier of the area and the first emperor of Han Dynasty, I think. Right? Yeah? So this is an important dynasty for China, right? Because again, it will solidify a lot of things that will serve as the foundation for Chinese culture and governance going forward, but also it lasts quite a long time, right? Qin lasted 30 years, right? He was only in power for about 10 or 12 years, right? And his dynasty maybe lasted a year or two after that. So it's a pretty short dynasty, but Han Dynasty here lasts for about 400 years, right? So it really has a lot to do with sort of creating the culture as we know it to be. What's Han society like? What kind of things do people do? How is it organized? Well, let's just talk about what kind of things do people do? Huh? Yeah, lots of people farm, right? So there's a quote, I don't know whose quote it is, but they said, history is made by a minority of people while most people are carrying water buckets. And so indeed we're kind of talking about, Liu Bang and the Emperor of Qin and all these, sort of great powerful people, but most people are just working their farms during this period. That's kind of their existence, right? So yeah, 90% of society are farmers, simple people tending the land. What other kinds of occupations are there? What's that? There are scholars, yeah, there's people who are studying and reading and writing. Who else are there? Traders, yeah, people who are businessmen making money. Who? Landlords, yeah. People who are rich enough to own land and then they rent it back to people who farm it, right? Who else? Yeah, we've got government officials, and it sounds like we've got quite a few, right? I don't know what your impression of reading this section is, but it turns out that the governance of the Han Empire was a pretty complicated business, right? There's lots of different levels of officials and people who report to other people. It's a pretty complex administrative system for a state, right? So there's lots of people working in the state, making sure that it runs, right? Who else is there? Sure, there's probably some slaves. Who else? The emperor himself, yep. Right, so the emperor, his wife, kind of people belonging to the emperor's family who constantly fight for influence, right? If anyone likes to watch The Crown, you know how that goes. What else? Who else? Who else? Who else? We've probably got craftspeople, people who make things. We've probably got soldiers, teachers. Probably have teachers. Yeah, so we've got all these we have a pretty complex society, it sounds like here. How does this society govern itself? How does it run itself? What's the administration like? Right, so they have this foundation of legalism, right? So the emperor of Qin sort of created this law code that applied to everyone, and this sort of system of rewards and punishments to try to sort of control the people of the country. And so the Han Dynasty kind of inherits that sort of legalist framework. But then what else do they do? Yeah, they develop this Imperial Confucianism. How's that work? It's a what? That's kind of what Confucius would say, right? He would say ruling with humanity, ruling with Ren. But how did that kind of operate in practice? They kind of had a sneaky way of doing this. Not sneaky, but clever. In what way? They incorporated Confucius's ideas into the kind of culture of the area, but how they do it? What's that? Right, so they were writing and teaching these in schools, right? Children were learning Confucian texts and sort of Confucian etiquette. What else did they do, though? This is particularly clever, I think. Right, and then what would they nominated for what? Right, so your path to greater education and your path to wealth and status, like being part of the sort of imperial government, that was related to how good of a Confucian student you were. So local officials were choosing students from school that were smart and talented, but also showed virtue according to what Confucius had taught. And so if you did those things, if you had good marks and your schoolwork was good and you expressed Confucian values and Confucius's version of virtue, then you might be chosen to go on to higher education, and then you might find yourself as a government official, and then you'd have kind of money and power and status. And so do you think students learned their Confucian values and tried to practice them? Yeah, they did, right? Very clever. It's a very clever incentive to get people to learn these things and to govern the state with them. What about the government system itself? What was it kind of like? What was it like? What's that? What was the government system like? Or how did it work? Or how was it structured? Yeah, there kind of are many layers, right? There's lots of officials who report to other officials, who report to other officials. What else? So it's this kind of hierarchical system. Right? So there's some the relatives of the emperor are kind of way up in the government system and are advising him, maybe, right? Nepotism. Um, and there's also kind of like there's heads of certain parts of the economy, right? In terms of infrastructure and finance and things like that. And when I was reading it, it was really interesting because I was reading and I was thinking, wow, this is almost how a modern state works, right? You've got a head of the government, and then you've got some kind of high-ranking ministers below him, and then other people report to them, and it's it's kind of very, again, hierarchical and organized. And so we really have in Han Dynasty here, we really have a very sophisticated ancient state, right, with potentially 60 million people living in it, right? So the amount of kind of coordination and organization and writing and planning and policy making that goes into this is pretty substantial, right? And this is 2,000 years ago, but the level of complexity here is quite something, I think. Let's see. So I guess we've kind of covered question 4, right? We said that they were teaching Confucian ideas in school, and that was kind of your path to entering into government administration and maybe a life of wealth and power. So there was a lot of incentive for people to learn and practice these Confucian values. Why else did we say that they wanted to incorporate Confucian values into the state? Yes. Yeah, we said that, but I mean a little bit earlier, maybe like a few classes ago, we talked about, yeah, it's a way to maintain social order, right? So if you're in charge of a society, you create rules, and then it's like, okay, well, how am I going to get these people to behave and follow the rules, right? And so for Qin, it was like, I'm going to harshly punish them, right? If you break the rules, harsh punishment. If you do good things, then I will reward you, right? The carrot and the stick, if you will. And then when Liu Bang comes to power, he's advised, that last dynasty was pretty brutal. Maybe we can encourage people to behave and to follow the rules in a different way, right? And so here they use Confucian ideas of humanity and virtue, and they kind of infuse them into the school system, but also make those Confucian values a prerequisite for serving in the government and for success, right? And so people have an incentive to practice those values. And of course, those values are all about humanity and respect and filial piety, right? So your respect and the need for you to obey your parents and respect your parents. And in Han Dynasty, who is the ultimate parent? At the top. The emperor, right? Liu Bang is the ultimate parent. And so, you're going to follow the rules of the emperor because that's an expression of filial piety, right? You respect and obey your parents, and Liu Bang, the emperor, is the ultimate. He's the parent of the entire state, right? So again, these Confucian ideas are very useful for a ruler, and again, the Han Dynasty emperors are kind of very clever in terms of mixing them into the governance of the state and the culture in order to get people to sort of buy into them. Smart thinking. Okay, and last question, what's the Silk Road? Okay, and where's the trade route go? Yeah, it's a trade route that goes all the way across Asia, and it connects the sort of the Mauryan Empire in India to the south, all the way to the Parthian Empire, kind of in modern day Iran, into Egypt and Greece and Rome. All of these kind of ancient civilizations are connected together by the Silk Road, right? And of course, the Chinese are trading silk, but also other things for, sort of luxury commodities that other empires and other civilizations have to offer. And so again, there's a pretty significant amount of globalization going on here, even 2,500 years ago, right? All of these ancient civilizations are connected with each other, trading, luxury goods, right? Gold and precious stones, ivory, tusks from elephants, types of cloth like silk, all these things, spices, salt, all of these things are moving back and forth, luxury items from one sort of big civilization to another, right? To even 2,000 years ago. Okay, so I'm just going to jump ahead a few here. So this is what I'd kind of like us to think about. Where's the slide I'm looking for, guys? Oh, this is the one. So, in kind of trying to summarize China, kind of what have we learned that we could sort of put under these headings? So, what have we learned about kind of connections between culture and environment? Sorry? The Silk Road. I think that might be an interaction and exchange one. But since we're talking about it, yeah, we know that the Chinese Empire, particularly the Han, was in contact with these other civilizations far away through the Silk Road, right? And these ancient civilizations were trading back and forth, especially after Han Dynasty emperors started to protect the road, right? Because it's dangerous, right? You're going down the Silk Road with all of your really expensive luxuries, but if nobody's protecting the road, you're probably going to get ripped off by bandits if you're not careful, right? So once the Han Dynasty start to guard and protect the road, it becomes more safe. People start to trade more, right? And make more money. So yeah, that's an interaction, right? These ancient civilizations or empires are in contact with each other, trading luxury goods back and forth. What else? Under any heading, I guess. Right? What have we learned about? What's that?
The emperor is a big thing, other than
Right. Yeah. So we have a system of monarchies, right? We have a long history of monarchy, ruler after ruler, either kings or eventually emperors. We have dynasties of emperors that last, a very short time. We have dynasties of emperors that last for hundreds of years. We have periods of kind of political instability in the middle where everyone's fighting with each other. What else?
also they have seen some cheating and overthrowing by others over the first time and the 80s.
Yeah, it's the Game of Thrones, right? It's people are always sort of conspiring to try to get themselves on the throne in one way or the other, right? And almost no one would dare oppose Qin, right? He was too powerful and too strong. But once he died, there was treachery, right? And so the first son was, told to commit suicide, so the 18th son could unlawfully take power or unethically take power or something. What's that? How do you know what? How do we know?
According to historians, is what they thought?
It's a good question. You know that
Like the specifics, it's specifically the age, and how do we know that?
the age of the sun.
The 18th sun.
Oh, why was it? How do we know it was the 18th one?
Specifically
It is. You know, people have been writing history for a long time, and so especially the history of royals and royal families. And so I suspect there are written records and books that tell the story of, you know, ancient China, that tell the story of the Qin dynasty, probably from hundreds or thousands of years ago. Whether the story that we know or the story that we just heard is 100% accurate sometimes is difficult to know, especially because some of these things get written down quite a while after they actually happened. And so it's possible that we have a very good record of from ancient historians about Qin and the 18th sun and all that stuff. It's also possible that historians wrote about it hundreds of years later. And so, you know, you might have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt. But people were writing history, particularly the history of rulers, from very early on. Right? One of the earliest forms of writing we have in the world is actually a king's list from Mesopotamia, right? And so, you know, the history of rulers, the history of powerful people was being written down very early on. But again, how accurate that story is, maybe not. What else did we learn that fits under these categories?
Power and authority and those interactions which you the Qin, the emperor, and then the farmers interact with each other and like them in order to be rewarded.
Yeah, so we see a few very kind of clever methods of exerting power and control over people, right? So Qin puts 5 families in a team and makes them all responsible to each other, and they all get rewarded together or they all get punished together. Very clever, right? We see them use Confucian ideas as kind of your path to success in the Han Dynasty, which is again a very clever way to sort of get control over people or get them to do what you want them to do. What else?
We also saw some of the Egyptian philosophical ideas where the king could be God or one who can sing for
Yeah. Yeah, we see again that pattern where rule is legitimized with some sort of supernatural backing, right? Either the king is chosen by the gods or blessed by the gods, or he's the prince of heaven or the son of heaven, or as in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh actually is a living god on earth. But there's often some kind of connection to the supernatural being, right? I am in charge over all of you because the gods have told me, right? Or the gods have chosen me, or I am the son of heaven, or I am a god, or whatever story is being told. There's a connection between the ruler and whatever is up there, right? That's good. What else? Right? What about, okay, so we see some spiritual traditions showing up, like Taoism, right? What should we know about Taoism? Yes. Whatever you do, do not interfere with the Tao. Yeah, so we've got this life force that kind of governs the universe, and people need to live in alignment with it, right? What else do we hear? In terms of environment, yeah, there's kind of two major river systems in China, the Yellow and the Yangtze. And the Yellow is kind of where a lot of these emperor, civilizations kind of appear, right, around the Yellow River. Similar to other civilizations that also appear next to rivers. What else?
Also, depending on farming.
Right? This is a society that's dependent on intensive agriculture, right? That's what allows them to have a food surplus, and that's what allows them to build a more complicated civilization on top of it. You can't do that in a situation where everyone is just farming for their food, right? You need to produce more food than you can eat so that people can do other things, which of course we see that they are doing other things. What else? Social hierarchies, absolutely, right? This is a society with a bunch of different levels to it. Some people that have no wealth and no power, no nothing, and then some people that have all the wealth and all the power, right? So a lot of, and people in between too. What else?
Conflicts and conflict resolution.
Yeah, so we see, and China's kind of interesting too, because in all of this, we haven't really heard about any other countries, have we? No, right? So China's kind of like off on its own. Yeah, they're in a way, they're kind of off the map, right? Because they're well separated from like the Parthians and the Seleucids and the Romans and the Greeks and the Macedonians. They're all way in the west. And then there's this giant desert. And then there's India, and we know we have a Mauryan Empire in India, but they're kind of blocked from getting into China by the Himalayas, right? There's this giant mountain range. And so China's kind of off on its own, and they don't really have to deal with any foreign invaders, so to speak. And so there's lots of conflict going on, but it's all internal, right? There's warring states going back and forth, but they don't really have to deal with, the Greeks showing up on their doorstep trying to take them over or anything like that. Yeah, first empire in not in the world, but definitely in that part of the world for sure. We see the first empires. Maybe the last thing we'll say, because we're fresh out of time here, is that sort of idea of the cosmic order, right? That's sort of those two forces that were locked in struggle, right? The phoenix and the dragon, the male and the female, the earth and the sky, right? And humans' sort of responsibility to balance those things, right? To do rituals to keep the balance. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so we'll call it there. Come back tomorrow. We'll just review this kind of stuff really quickly, and then I think we'll start on Greece. So we did well today. New thing tomorrow, gear switch. That is all. Have a nice afternoon, and I will see you tomorrow.